has never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. Whether you're ready to start, restart, or re-energize your vegan or plant-based practice, this podcast is for you. I'm Michelle Olander, life coach, vegan, ADHD matriarch, travel lover, and smoothie loather. And I know that it's the details that get in the way of your vegan journey. But I like to believe that the obstacle is always the way. So every week we meet here where I translate the tools of life coaching and Stoic philosophy. I bring you actionable tips, some laughs, interesting guests, and vegan ideas for everyone at any age. All to help you veg your best. Episode 305. What if vegan backlash is a good sign? Welcome back, my veg your besties. It's Michelle. And before we get into today's episode, I wanted to do a quick check-in on last week. I know. I gave my U.S. besties homework. I'm sorry, because last week I talked about the Save Our Bacon Act, part of the 2026 Farm Bill, which is under discussion in July of 2026 in the United States Senate. So in plain English, that provision could cut back important state animal welfare laws, including parts of laws like California's Proposition 12, and it could make it much harder for other states to pass similar protections in the future. So if you haven't listened yet, please go back and do that. It's focused. I kept it pretty short, and there's still time to act as of this recording date. And even if you're not in the United States, I think this issue still really matters, because the backlash against veganism, compassion for animals, plant-based people, that's not only a United States issue. Honestly, the United States, we've got a bunch of issues right now, but we're not alone in that. So there's a pattern, and that backlash may be telling us something. And not that it's good, but it could be a good sign. That backlash might be a signal that we are really on the verge of making some important things happen. So if you did listen to episode 304, this is your reminder. Did you make the call? Did you send a message to the United States Senate or to your senators? The link is in the show notes for both this episode and last week's, and it really, I think it only should take you about 5 minutes, and it genuinely matters, I think. So today, I thought we could zoom out a little bit. Vegans on social media are frequently talking about backlash and being targeted and being criticized exceptionally harshly. And, I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because last week was one specific issue, given admittedly the Farm Bill, but it was one specific issue. This week is about the question that goes underneath all these different fights, challenges, issues. How many of us does it take, or will it take, before we start to see the change we're hoping to see? And because many of you are listening from outside the United States, thank you. Thanks for listening. Today's episode is going to be a little more global, too, a little less U.S.-centered. And I think the pattern we're talking about applies almost anywhere people are trying to change food systems, enact animal welfare laws, protect our climate, make our school meals and restaurant options and hospital meals healthier and more sustainable. So I hope this episode will be a little bit of an antidote to the overwhelm many of us feel, because overwhelm, in my case, is what usually will keep me on a couch scrolling or checking out in whatever way we check out. And I get it. When we look at the scale of harm in the food systems, it can really feel like the only thing that would be enough is everybody waking up and changing everything all at once today. But I'm not sure that's necessarily true. We don't really need everyone to do everything, do we? We need more people doing something, but maybe a little more visibly and together over time. And I think there is some interesting, relevant social evidence to help us understand that. Because I think what we're talking about today will help us believe, and belief really is a motivator, isn't it? Belief helps us to act and stay focused even when things look discouraging. So today's more about giving a little more accurate picture of where we actually stand. Because on any given day, on any given moment in Instagram, we can see a very discouraging story where nothing changes and most people aren't with us, and it can look and feel discouraging. But the evidence may actually point to something more hopeful, even down to those trolly comments many of us get on our texts. So let me ask you something. When you're starting to think about building support in the world for kinder, less harmful food choices, whether for you that's veganism or plant-based eating or supporting higher welfare standards in agriculture, whatever your version of this looks like, what does success look like to you? I would guess for many of us, success looks like most of the people you know being on board and most of the people you don't know being on board. Maybe actually a majority of citizens, or maybe everyone eventually. And from what I see, from where I sit, that can really feel impossibly far away. So I think that might be the wrong target, and I think it might actually lead to a lot of vegans burning out. The first goal might not be getting everyone to agree all at once. And that could be good news because that's not happening anytime soon. The first goal might be getting enough people to act in a visible way that some adjacent folks start to feel a little safer and a little less alone. There's a political scientist at Harvard's Kennedy School named Erica Chenoweth who's gotten a lot of press in the last 10 years. Anyway, she and her colleague looked at very specific questions about what actually causes major social and political change movements to succeed. And it wasn't who was the most inspiring or who had the best marketing, but what did the historical data show? And to keep this a little bit simple, I'm going to skim the research. If you want to go deeper, please do look up Erica Chenoweth's work at Harvard's Kennedy School or her TEDx talk. Anyway, Chenoweth looked at 323 major campaigns for change between 1900 and the year 2006. These were things like independence movements, regime change, major political transformations, like, if you remember, the Solidarity movement in Poland in the 1980s. They compared violent campaigns to nonviolent ones, and the first finding got a lot of attention. Nonviolent campaigns succeeded at a rate of about twice the rate of violent ones. So that alone is worth thinking about. But the second finding is what I'm talking about today. In the original data set, campaigns that reached about 3.5% of the population in active participation all succeeded. All of them. 3.5%. 3.5%. Now, that's not because it's a magic number. It doesn't mean that if we hit 3.5% later on today, everything would be changed by next week. Chenoweth herself has warned everyone not to treat this like 3.5 like it's something in physics. It's more important to think of it as a sign. And by the time that many people, roughly 3.5%, are visibly involved, actively involved, something much bigger is already moving underneath. Active and visible. That means people are not just quietly agreeing at home. They're showing up in ways other people can see. They may be calling and voting and organizing, asking, marching, podcasting, writing, buying differently, doing it over time. So when enough people are visibly committed to something, three things tend to happen. First, people who are less active and less visible start to realize they're not alone. The active people are not the whole story. They're the part we can see. They are the iceberg that we can see above the water. Underneath, there are many more people who may share the same values or parts of those same values, but have not found a way to act yet. The second thing is change starts to feel normal, safer, maybe even possible. And the question starts to shift in their minds from, could this ever happen, to, how can we help this happen? And third, people and institutions start to move. Institutions really start to take this seriously. Companies begin to diversify or hedge their bets on the issue. Schools experiment. Politicians start to pander or cater to the new ideas. Restaurants add options, not because everyone's had a change of heart overnight, but because they start to see where the direction is, where people are moving. And that's the part I find very important for us in this community. We do not need everyone to do everything. We need enough visible participation that the next step becomes easier for everyone else to lean in that direction. We need to make it safer. We need to make it feel, for want of a better expression, we need to make it feel less weird. Now, Erica Chenoweth's data set was not about veganism, so we're extrapolating from her data to think about a direction for our community. So it's not about school lunches or plant milk or animal welfare laws. That's not what Chenoweth was looking into. It was about campaigns seeking major political change, regime change, independence movement. So no, plant-based living is not exactly analogous to what she was studying, but I think the logic really will help us think. Look at civil rights. Look at the anti-smoking movement. Look at the way public behavior can change once enough people make a different norm visible. Now, U.S. surveys put vegan identity, at least in the United States, at around 2%. That's not the same as Chenoweth's 3.5%. And being vegan or plant-based is not the same as being an active, visible part of a campaign. It's not the same as advocating, verbally creating laws, having a podcast, making a TV show, making a documentary. So it's not the same. So we're talking about trying to move in a direction of 3.5% of very visible, active people. So even if we are at 2% or even more, I don't want to say we're almost there because that would not be exactly right. But it tells us something important. There is a real visible core, and the group around that core is much larger than it looks. One recent survey from the Good Food Institute found that more than half of Americans had tried plant-based meats. About 40% had eaten it within 12 months or the past year. Other recent retail data found that 6 in 10 U.S. households bought some kind of plant-based food in 2025. And that's obviously not the same thing as saying most people are vegan, because they're not. But it does show that the public is not simply hostile or simply uninterested. Many people are already sort of interested, kinda on board, nearly ready to try another thing, right? So the values underneath what we care about, compassion towards animals, concern about the climate, wanting to make choices that do less harm to workers and communities where animal agriculture takes place, those are not fringe values. So there's no easy antipathy between us and a hostile public, right? You can sometimes feel that way, but I think what we're going to talk about next will reframe that a little bit for you, because the gap is between a visible minority and a much, much larger group of people who already care about some portion of that, but have not connected it to action yet. And we may be much closer to a tipping point than all those hard days and trolls on Instagram or Facebook make it feel like, you know? So here's a small everyday version of what I mean. If you think about plant milk in coffee shops or the supermarket dairy aisle, it did not require every customer to stop drinking dairy. It required just enough people asking, often enough, in enough places that the request stopped sounding strange, bizarre, weird, right? Enough baristas heard the question. Enough Stop and Shop managers noticed the demand. Enough Tesco shops realized this was not a weird fringe thing anymore. And then at some point, oat milk stops feeling like some sort of extreme accommodation for strange people and started feeling like a normal option for consumers. And that's the infrastructure changing. By infrastructure, that's what I mean, that the things around us that shape what we can choose and where we can choose it, menus, store shelves, school lunches, hospital meals, nutrition labels, laws, habits, etc. So when those things change, the next compassionate choice gets easier. That's the point. We're not trying to make every person perfect before anything changes. Certainly, the lion's share, the large majority of people that go into Starbucks or the supermarket are not vegan. But there are many, many vegan choices available now. We're trying to make the compassionate choice easier, more visible, more normal. So this is the part I want us to sit with a little bit more today. Understanding 3.5% of the population only helps most if we understand what works against getting to an active, visible 3.5% of the population. A movement doesn't just get weakened from the outside. It can be weakened from the inside. And one way to weaken a movement is to make it look harsh, unforgiving, extreme from the outside, and exhausting from the inside. So we've all seen that, right? A vegan says something online. Maybe it's harsh. Maybe it's taken out of context. Maybe it's the most extreme version of what anyone said that day. And then that one example gets shared as if it represents everyone. And suddenly the whole movement looks judgmental and extreme and harsh and unforgiving. And at the same time, inside the movement, people start fighting about who's doing enough, who's pure enough, who belongs, who does not. And that makes the circle smaller. And a smaller circle is going to be much easier to ignore. The industries most heavily invested in the current food system do not have to defeat a movement outright. Sometimes it's enough to make that movement look smaller, more ridiculous, and more divided than it really is. And I don't say this to be paranoid. I say it because naming it can, I think, help us protect ourselves from it. There's nothing wrong with holding yourself or the people you know to a high standard. If you're vegan, if you make every purchasing decision with care, if you hold a deep and steady ethical commitment, I applaud you. That has real value. But holding yourself to a high standard is different than requiring everyone else to meet the exact same standard before they're allowed to join the work that we're doing. Now, I know that requirement might feel like a positive ethical position, but it also works like a strategy. And as a strategy, it makes our circle smaller. And instead of thinking of it as lowering the standard, I really want to think of it as widening the on-ramp, building a bigger tent. A coalition is a group of people working together on one shared goal, even when they don't agree on every tactic and on every outcome, and we need more coalitions. The anti-smoking movement gave us a very clear example a couple decades ago, because when that movement started building some real momentum, it didn't begin by demanding that every supporter be a non-smoker and only a non-smoker. It organized around certain goals like warning labels on packages and no advertising to children and smoke-free workplaces and smoke-free restaurants. Many smokers, many people who were themselves smokers supported many of those goals. There were parents who smoked but didn't want cigarette ads aimed at their kids. There were medical professionals who smoked but still advocated for a smoke-free hospital or office. Those people were not perfect examples of an end goal, but they were real participants in a shared goal. And a smoker who backed a ban on cigarette ads targeting children was not a hypocrite. A smoker who supported smoke-free hospitals was not, pretending. They were helping to create a new infrastructure. And that movement succeeded because it changed the rules. It changed the spaces and the way we inhabited those spaces socially. It became easier not to smoke. In some places, it became harder to smoke. And then individual behavior changed too, but it didn't have to change first. Behavior changed because the world around that behavior changed. So that's an idea I want us to keep in mind. Someone who's cut their meat consumption in half, but not completely, can still support laws like California's Proposition 12, which, to remind you, is the one that set space standards for breeding pigs, egg-laying hens, and veal calves. And it's one of the statutes that would be at risk if the Save Our Bacon provision within the 2026 Farm Bill passes. Someone who chooses plant-based meats when they're available can still ask a school board for better lunch options. Someone who's not vegan at all can still oppose the Save Our Bacon Act. Some people will attack that as hypocrisy. And I would like to suggest that we see it as participation. Participation is what will build the infrastructure that makes the next compassionate choice easier for everyone. When a restaurant adds a serious plant-based section, it's building infrastructure. When a school district offers a real plant-based lunch, it's building infrastructure. When the pediatrician recommending protein also mentions beans and lentils and tofu, that's building infrastructure. The person who's asking, do you have a plant-based option? She's building infrastructure. Welcoming people who are not 100% acting completely in concert with us doesn't mean we don't have any standards or that we're not serious. I think it just means that we understand how change happens. And it means we understand that the compassion at the center of everything we care about also extends to other human beings finding their way bit by bit, just as we did. So the next time you find yourself in one of those internal purity debates, you'll see social media will start offering you that pull regularly because it's designed to. Who benefits from creating division among people who genuinely, clearly would like to limit the consumption of animals or industrial animal agriculture? So what can we do? We can do three things, I think. First of all, we can just make our support a little bit more visible. Some of us have been very, very quiet. We can pipe up once in a while, a little bit more, even if it's not all the time. Some of us have podcasts. Maybe we can be a little bit more visible across other platforms. That doesn't mean performing your values perfectly online. I think it just means letting people see you making those choices. And maybe it means making a call to a government representative, or sending an email, or asking a restaurant, or challenging your school district. Being visible when you do it will help other people realize that they're not alone. The second thing we can do is we can choose concrete, specific fights. In the smoking movement, some of those fights looked like getting warning labels on packages and limiting ads to children and smoke-free workplaces. In our situation, a concrete fight might look like making sure that there's a plant-based meal available for kids at school, and that state animal welfare laws are enacted, and also that there are people investigating whether those welfare laws are being adhered to. Other fights might be trying to make sure that there are better rules for hospitals and cafeterias, or for nutritional education in medical schools, or real plant-based options in restaurants. Concrete fights give people a place to enter. And they let you be, I know I'm not perfect, but I agree with this. How could this be wrong? How could this be a problem? And that matters. And number 3, we can widen the on-ramp. We can make the tent a little bit bigger. We can invite curious people instead of correcting them into silence. We can celebrate the half step taken imperfectly that some people are nervous about when they're moving in a vegan direction. And we can remember that every single person who joins a concrete goal makes that circle more visible for the next person. And those are ripples that are very powerful. We don't need everyone to do everything. We just need more people doing more things more visibly together over time. I think that's a lot less overwhelming than trying to get everyone to change. And I think the work of Erica Chenoweth encourage us to believe that that is actually how sustainable change happens. So I want to end with the thing that actually that made me want to do this episode and I hope make you feel a little more hopeful about everything. Erica Chenoweth's research doesn't give us some sort of simple recipe. It doesn't tell us how to change the food system by next month, but it does remind us that our visible participation as citizens matters, and we do not have to convert everyone before real change can start snowballing. We just have to build a committed, visible, active community large enough that the values underneath it become kind of hard to ignore. So my episode of last week, the fight over the Save Our Bacon Act, I think that's evidence that this movement really matters. The backlash from big agriculture does not prove that we're winning, but it can show us that that movement is visible enough that we are challenging very entrenched, enormous, powerful groups. So that's what I try to remind myself of when I experience trolls in social media, or when I see the horrible things people write on, on the comments on vegans' Instagram posts. The question is not whether we can build a circle that's perfect, but wider, kinder, stronger. And I think you can be part of that in your own way, however you show up. If you listen to this podcast, there's some portion of it that you already feel like doing and learning more about. Even asking questions is visible. And I'm glad that we get to figure this out together. We don't need everyone to do everything. We need more of us doing something. Being a little more visible, a little more together. And anytime you see a vegan being raked over the coals, send him or her a little message that you see them. Push back against the kind of forces that are trying to make us disappear, play small, shut up. That's something that's in your power, even if you don't feel like you're ready to be visible as an individual, plant-based person or vegan or vegetarian or animal advocate. Now, remember, the links for the Save Our Bacon Act, that still should be useful to do when this episode comes out. It should be still timely. It is as of the time of this recording. All that's in the show notes. And as always, if you know someone who would make a great guest on this podcast, or if you're doing work in the UK or Europe or Canada or Australia on these issues, and you'd like to connect, please do. Please reach out and let me know how you veg your best.
Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.